storyteller, and tonight, I'll help you drift off with a relaxing story. Before we dive in, please like and subscribe. Now, get comfortable and let the sounds of nature carry you away into peaceful slumber. I've always been drawn to nature. Growing up in a small town where winding roads and expansive forests were my constant companions. From a young age, I spent weekends with my father, hiking the trails, following deer tracks, and discovering hidden streams. He was a forest ranger, a man who could read the woods like a book, knowing the names of every tree, every bird, every rustle in the underbrush. He taught me how to track animals and how to listen to the forest's stories, stories that could only be heard in the quiet moments before the sun fully set. He always said, the forest has its secrets, things that only reveal themselves after dark. As a child, I didn't fully understand what he meant. All I knew was that I loved being out there, the quiet of it, the sense of being at home in the wilderness. As I grew older, this connection only deepened, and I found myself wanting to be part of something bigger, something that felt more real than the bustle of city life. When I turned 24, I decided to take a step I had never imagined. Becoming a forest ranger like my father, it wasn't just a job, it was a calling. I had always been fascinated by the quiet life in the woods, the idea of solitude, and the simple rhythm of nature. Little did I know that this decision would lead me into the heart of something far darker and far more dangerous than anything I had ever encountered. The first few months on the job were peaceful. I became familiar with the trails, the wildlife, and the way the forest seemed to breathe with life. It wasn't until the fall that things began to change. The silence of the woods, once comforting, started to feel unnerving. Strange sounds would echo through the trees, unnatural sounds, the kind that didn't belong in the natural order. I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just my imagination playing tricks on me after a long day on the trails. That was until one September morning when everything changed. A missing person report came in over the radio. A hiker, a man named Paul, had gone missing after wandering off the marked trails. His wife Karen was frantic when I arrived at the campsite. She described him as an experienced hiker, someone who knew the woods well, but something was off about her story. She spoke about a trail that wasn't on any of the maps, a place her husband liked to explore on his own. She didn't seem to realize that such unmarked paths could be dangerous, especially in the wilderness, and her worry intensified my own sense of unease. I reassured Karen that we would find Paul, but deep down, I had a sinking feeling that the forest I thought I knew so well had secrets I had never imagined. The first few hours of the search were uneventful. I traced the trail Paul had been on, following his footprints through the soft earth. The forest felt strangely quiet, more so than usual. The chirping of birds had faded, and the usual rustling of leaves seemed distant, as if muffled by something invisible. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me with each step I took. Karen stayed behind at the campsite, her anxiety palpable as I radioed for backup. Though the park's limited staff meant I would be handling the majority of the search alone for now. The silence around me felt unnatural, the way the trees seemed to loom over the trail, their branches stretching out like dark, bony fingers reaching into the sky. Every once in a while, I would glance over my shoulder, sensing something watching me, but when I turned, there was nothing, just the ever-present quiet. About a mile into the forest, I found Paul's footprints again. They were clear at first, leading deeper into the woods, heading toward a dense thicket. But then something odd happened. His tracks just stopped, not gradually, as if he had turned around or wandered off the path, but abruptly, as though he had simply vanished. I crouched down, studying the ground around me. There were no signs of him veering off the trail. No disturbed leaves, no broken branches. The earth was untouched, except for the tracks that ended so suddenly. The strangest thing was the absence of sound. No chirping birds, no insects buzzing around. The forest had become unnervingly still, as though it held its breath. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had seen missing persons before, people who had lost their way, taken a wrong turn, or wandered off the marked trails. But never had I encountered something like this, where the tracks simply ceased. It was as if Paul had stepped off the face of the earth. I called in my findings, but with the park so short-staffed, they advised me to hold off until backup arrived. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Something in the air, in the silence, urged me to keep going. I pressed forward, my heart pounding in my chest, the forest growing darker around me with each step. The trees grew thicker, their twisted branches blocking out the light from above, casting long, deep shadows on the trail. The further I walked, the more it felt as though the forest was closing in on me. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made me jump. It was as if the woods were alive, breathing, watching. Then I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a small patch of blood, just a few drops scattered across the mossy ground, leading deeper into the woods. At first I thought it was from an animal, perhaps a deer, but as I knelt down to examine it, the smell hit me. It was wrong to pungent, almost metallic, but with an underlying stench of decay. A sharp, sour scent that seemed to cling to the air and choke the life out of everything around it. I shouldn't have gone any further. Every instinct told me to turn back, to wait for backup, to stay with Karen and radio for help. But there was something compelling me to follow the blood trail, something deep inside me that refused to back down. No matter how wrong everything felt, I pushed forward, following the blood deeper into the trees. The air felt thick now, almost suffocating. The forest seemed darker than it should be, even though I knew it was only late afternoon. I wasn't sure where I was anymore, or how far I had gone, but the deeper I ventured, the more I felt as though the forest had swallowed me whole. And then I saw it. In a small clearing ahead, a figure hunched over something. For a moment, I thought it was Paul, maybe injured, trying to protect himself from whatever had happened. But as I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't Paul at all. It wasn't human. The creature standing in front of me was a twisted mockery of life. Its body was too long, its limbs too thin, almost skeletal. Its fur was patchy, matted in places, and its face was elongated in a way that didn't make sense. It wasn't like anything I had ever seen before, certainly not any animal I could name. It was hunched over something on the ground. At first, I thought it might be Paul's body, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't. It wasn't anything that could be identified. It was wrong. The thing turned slowly, sensing my presence before I could even react. Its gaze met mine, and I froze. There was something in its eyes, something empty, hollow, but full of a terrifying intelligence. It stared at me, unblinking, as if it could see straight through me. Then it moved. Fast. Too fast. Before I could even process what was happening, the creature charged. I don't remember running. Not really. All I remember is the terror flooding my veins, the sharp sting of branches whipping across my face, the ground beneath me slipping as I tried to escape. My heart thudded in my chest, drowning out all other sounds. Whatever that thing was, it was faster than any creature should be. I could feel it closing in on me, the silence of the forest pressing against my ears as it gained on me. I didn't dare look back, I couldn't. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the ground gave way beneath me. I tumbled, rolling down a steep slope, crashing through bushes, my body jerking violently as I slammed into the ground. My head spun, everything went black, and I lost consciousness for a moment. When I came to, everything around me felt muffled. My head throbbed, and my body ached from the fall. For a moment, I wasn't sure where I was, my vision hazy, and my mind slow to catch up. The world seemed distant, like I was trapped in some kind of dream, or maybe a nightmare. The stillness of the forest felt almost suffocating now, and the air was thick, heavy, as though it had been tainted by something that didn't belong. I sat up slowly, wincing as the pain shot through my side. My head cleared enough for me to realize that I was lying at the bottom of a steep hill. A tangle of bushes and sharp rocks around me. I could hear the faint sounds of rustling in the distance, almost like leaves shuffling, the wind moving through the trees. But something about the rhythm felt wrong. The forest had gone eerily quiet again, except for the soft echoes of that unsettling rustling. I reached for my radio, but it was gone. The fall must have knocked it loose. Panic rose in my chest, but I pushed it down. I had to focus. I had to find a way back to the ranger station to get help. I couldn't stay out here alone with that thing in the woods. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Something out there was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. I stumbled to my feet, disoriented but determined. I scanned the trees, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow, expecting anything to move. The forest felt oppressive, the very air thick with an unnatural silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was like walking through a haunted place, where every step I took was being watched, where the forest itself seemed to breathe with a dark life of its own. Then I heard the sound of something moving behind me. It wasn't the usual creaking of branches or the scurrying of small animals. It was heavier, deliberate, footsteps, slow, measured, as though something was stalking me from the shadows. My heart skipped a beat, and a wave of terror crashed over me. I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were made of stone, my body frozen in place by an overwhelming sense of dread. I forced myself to move. Step by step, I stumbled forward, desperately trying to ignore the gnawing feeling that I was being followed. The ground was uneven, and every twig that snapped beneath my boots sounded deafening in the silence. My breath came in sharp gasps, and I fought to keep my composure. The rustling grew louder, and then I heard something that made my blood run cold, a low growl. Barely audible, but unmistakable. It was coming from behind me, closer now, almost like a whisper on the wind. The growl seemed to vibrate in my bones, sending a tremor through my body. I turned, desperate to see what was there, but the forest was empty. The shadows danced around me, playing tricks on my eyes. I was alone, or so I thought. A flash of movement caught my Aja figure, tall and impossibly thin, standing just at the edge of the trees. For a split second, I thought it was another hiker, someone who had gotten lost. But then I saw its limbs, long and unnaturally twisted. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything I could identify. Its eyes were glowing faintly, two orbs of unnatural light cutting through the shadows, like they were looking straight into my soul. And then it moved, faster than anything that size should have been able to. It darted toward me, its long limbs jerking in an unnatural, horrifying way. I didn't hesitate, turned and ran. My feet pounded against the forest floor, my breath ragged, but I could feel it behind me, just a few steps away. That suffocating silence grew louder, pressing in on me, as if the entire forest were closing in. The creature was gaining on me, its growl now a low hum, like a twisted melody that echoed in my mind. I could feel it, its presence hanging over me, its eyes burning into the back of my skull. Every step I took felt like it was leading me deeper into the nightmare, further from safety. I had no idea how long I ran, how far I had gone, but the terror in my chest was so overwhelming that I couldn't stop. The forest seemed endless, an oppressive maze that refused to let me escape. Then, just as suddenly as the creature had appeared, the ground beneath me gave way again. This time, I was prepared. I fell hard, tumbling down a slope, but managing to catch myself on a jagged rock. My body screamed in pain, but I couldn't stop. One had to get out of there. I had to survive. But when I picked myself up and looked around, I realized I was lost tardily and completely lost. The forest was unfamiliar now. The trees, the paths, they all seemed to twist into shapes that didn't make sense. The light was fading quickly, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, swallowing the forest whole. It was then that I heard it again, the growl. Only this time, it wasn't just behind me. It was everywhere, surrounding me. I could feel it in the air, in the earth beneath my feet, in the very trees themselves. Something was closing in, something that wasn't human, something that wasn't even natural. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my pulse a constant thrum in my ears. The night had descended on the forest with terrifying speed. The once familiar trees now looming over me like monstrous, gnarled figures in the darkness. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching toward me, as if the forest itself were reaching out, trying to drag me deeper into its tangled heart. I pushed forward, my legs aching, stumbling over rocks and roots as I tried to find any sign of the trail I had been on earlier. But everything was wrong now. The forest wasn't just unfamiliar, felt hostile. The quiet was unbearable. No animal calls, no rustling leaves in the wind, not even the sound of insects buzzing in the air. It was as if the very soul of the forest had been drained, leaving behind nothing but an oppressive void. Every step I took felt like an eternity. The air was thick with something I couldn't name. It wasn't the usual dampness of the woods or the earthy scent of decaying leaves. No, this was something more putrid, something that made my stomach churn. I tried to keep calm, to focus on finding my way back, but every time I looked over my shoulder, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That's when I heard it again, a low, guttural growl. It was close this time, far too close for comfort. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze. The sound wasn't coming from behind me anymore. It was ahead, a few yards off. The path, hidden in the dense underbrush. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body betrayed me, frozen in place, as the growl grew louder, more pronounced. It wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. I wasn't just being stalked, I was being hunted. I could hear something moving in the brush, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to get away from whatever it was. But I couldn't bring myself to move. It was like I was trapped in some sort of nightmare, where my legs refused to obey, and my mind couldn't process the danger surrounding me. The silence pressed in, suffocating. Then, without warning, the growl stopped. Just like that, the woods fell silent again. My breath was the only sound, ragged and desperate in the stillness. I moved slowly, cautiously, my eyes darting around for any sign of movement. There, at the edge of the clearing, I caught a glimpse of something. It was tall, impossibly tall, its body thin and stretched in ways that didn't look natural. It was crouched down, almost as if it were waiting, watching. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. There was no mistaking it. This thing, whatever it was the source of the terror that had been hunting me since I stepped into these woods. It was no animal, no creature from the forest. It was something older, something that belonged to the dark corners of the earth, to the forgotten places where no light had ever reached. I turned to run, my feet finally finding the strength to move. But just as quickly as I had turned, I heard the unmistakable sound of something crashing through the underbrush. It was too fast, too relentless. The creature was on me, its twisted form bounding toward me with unnatural speed. My mind screamed at me to get away, to find safety, but all I could think about was the blackness closing in around me. The trees seemed to close in as I ran, their branches reaching out like arms trying to hold me back. I could feel the creature gaining on me, the ground trembling with each of its steps. Then, with a sickening jolt, I hit something hard, an invisible barrier. The air around me seemed to shift, the silence growing heavier, more oppressive, and I realized too late that the forest had trapped me. There was nowhere to run. The trees closed in, their branches entangling my limbs, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. And then, just as I thought it was all over, I heard a voice. A voice in my head. It wasn't the creature's growl or the whisper of the wind. It was something worse, something older. The voice spoke to me without words, bypassing my ears entirely, planting itself straight into my mind. I couldn't understand what it was saying, but I felt it, the intent, the malice, the overwhelming certainty that I was prey. I struggled, my body desperate to break free, to escape. But it was as if the forest had claimed me, its grip tightening with every breath I took. The shadows around me deepened, and for a moment, everything went still. The silence was broken only by a chilling, high-pitched laugh that echoed in my mind, reverberating through the trees. It wasn't a sound any living creature could make. It was inhuman. I thought I was going to die there, in the heart of the forest, with that thing watching me, toying with me. But then, as suddenly as it had all started, it stopped. The creature's presence faded. The forest released me, and the air felt lighter, less oppressive. I didn't know how long I stood there, shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The forest felt empty now, silent again, but the dread lingered like a heavy fog around me. I turned, running without thinking, following the dim traces of the path I had wandered down. I didn't look back. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get out, to reach the ranger station, to get to safety. But in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't over. I had seen it, felt it. It was still out there, and it was waiting for me. I ran harder than I ever had before, with no clear direction, no map, just a frantic urge to get away from whatever had been following me, hunting me. My legs burned with exhaustion, and my lungs screamed for air, but I couldn't stop. The forest stretched on, an endless sea of trees, their shadows thickening with each passing second, as if they were closing in around me. The deeper I ran, the more I felt it, the pressure of something following, always just behind me, but never quite in sight. The silence around me was deafening, and my mind was slowly unraveling, the terror creeping into my thoughts, twisting them into something unrecognizable. My thoughts were clouded, chaotic. Was it real? Was this all in my head? Or was something truly out there, something ancient and hungry, that had been waiting in the dark corners of the forest for someone like me to stumble across it? I stumbled and fell again, my body crashing against the ground with a sickening thud. I lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, feeling the cold dirt beneath my fingers. The quiet was overwhelming, the kind of silence that presses in on you, suffocating and thick. But then it came again, the sound. That low, rumbling growl echoing through the trees, reverberating in my chest. It was closer this time, much closer. I forced myself to my feet, my head spinning, my thoughts swirling like a tornado. The growl was louder now, but still, I couldn't see it, couldn't hear its movements through the underbrush. The thing, whatever it was, had learned to move without sound, its presence only hinted at by the faintest rustle of leaves or the briefest shadow flickering in my peripheral vision. I pushed forward, panic flooding my senses, each step more frantic than the last. My surroundings blurred, the trees twisting into strange shapes, as my mind played tricks on me. The forest was warping, bending the very fabric of reality, and I couldn't make sense of anything anymore. The further I ran, the more alien the forest became. It was as if I had crossed some invisible line, stepped into a place where the rules no longer applied. I didn't dare look behind me, but the growl was unmistakable. The sound was always there, like an invisible weight pushing down on my chest, crushing my lungs with its presence. It was closing in. It was getting closer. I couldn't outrun it. And then I heard something that stopped me cold. A voice, a whisper, but not in the way a human might speak. It wasn't a voice at all, not really. It was like a presence in my mind, as if the forest itself were speaking to me. It was faint at first, like a breeze rustling through the trees, but it grew clearer with each passing second, until it felt like it was coming from every direction at once. You can't escape. The words weren't spoken in a language I understood. It was more like a feeling, an impression imprinted directly onto my mind. I could feel the malevolent intent behind the words. The certainty that this thing, whatever it was, had me in its grip, that there was nowhere I could go that it couldn't reach. I staggered forward, my thoughts growing more erratic, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I needed to keep moving. I needed to get to the ranger station. I needed to. No, you can't. The voice was louder now, drowning out all my thoughts, filling my head with a deafening, crushing presence that made my skin crawl. You are already lost. I stopped dead in my tracks. The trees around me were wrong. They weren't just trees anymore. They were eyes. Eyes that watched me from the darkness, blinking in and out of existence. Always there, always watching. The forest had turned against me, and I was trapped in a maze I couldn't escape from. My mind raced, trying to understand, trying to find a way out, but everything was slipping away, like sand through my fingers. The growl came again, closer this time, and I could feel it in my bones. The thing wasn't just following me, it was closing in, drawing nearer with each breath I took, as if it were pulling me toward it, into the heart of the darkness, where nothing could save me. I turned, ready to run again, but I was met with nothing but more trees, more shadows, more endless darkness. The path I had been following was gone. It had vanished, leaving me stranded in a forest that had twisted and changed, as though the woods themselves had conspired to trap me. I screamed, not caring anymore if anyone could hear me. I was losing my mind. I could feel it slipping, like a thread unraveling, piece by piece. The forest, the growl, the voice in my head, it was all blending together into something incomprehensible. And then, just as I thought it was over, something reached out of the darkness. A hand, long, thin fingers that seemed to stretch impossibly far, reaching for me through the shadows. I tried to move, tried to scream, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the suffocating silence. The hand didn't touch me, not yet. It just hovered there, like it was waiting for me to make a mistake, to step closer. I backed away, heart hammering in my chest, my legs shaking. I could feel the presence of the creature all around me, its eyes burning into my soul. The hand followed, inching toward me, its fingers twitching as if it could sense my fear, feeding off it. I closed my eyes, unable to bear the sight any longer. I didn't know where to go, what to do. The terror had consumed me completely, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The hand withdrew. The growl faded into the distance. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, and the forest returned to its unnatural silence. I opened my eyes, my body frozen in place, unsure of what had just happened. Was it real? Was it a hallucination? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I had to get out. I had to leave. But the deeper I went into the forest, the more I felt the truth settling in. There was no escape from whatever this thing was. The voice in my head was right. You are already lost. The world around me had fractured. What had once been the familiar, comforting embrace of the forest now felt like a cage. Every step I took seemed to take me further into a nightmare, a place where nothing made sense, and reality itself had become malleable. The trees no longer seemed like trees, but rather grotesque figures that twisted and writhed in the corners of my vision, always shifting, always changing. Shadows reached out from the depths of the forest, stretching toward me like long clawed hands, ready to pull me back into the darkness. I had no idea how much time had passed since I first started running. Minutes, hours. It didn't matter. All that mattered was that I couldn't stop moving. I couldn't let the thing catch me again. But the forest seemed to have other plans. No matter which direction I turned, no matter how fast I ran, the trees grew thicker, the underbrush more tangled. It was as though the forest itself was conspiring against me, keeping me trapped within its endless maze. I could hear it again, the growl. Closer now. Too close. It was low and guttural, echoing through the trees in a way that vibrated in my chest. A primal sound that felt as though it came from the very earth itself. It was the kind of growl you feel in your bones, a warning that something was coming, something that would tear you apart. I pushed forward, my heart pounding, my thoughts clouded by terror. My breath came in ragged gasps, and every part of me screamed to stop, to find safety, but I knew it was futile. I had crossed some invisible line in the forest, a threshold that had separated the known world from the unknown, and now there was no way back. Then I stumbled into a clearing. I didn't know how I got there or what had led me to this spot, but I knew immediately that something was wrong. The trees surrounding the clearing were twisted, their trunks warped and bent at unnatural angles. The ground was covered in an eerie, pale fog that seemed to swirl around my feet. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and I could feel something watching me from the shadows, waiting for me to make a mistake. I stepped forward, instinctively, though I knew better, and then I saw it. In the center of the clearing, beneath a twisted tree, lay Paul, or at least what was left of him. His body was mangled, torn apart in a way that made my stomach lurch. The blood around him had long since dried, but the air still carried that foul, metallic scent. His clothes were shredded, and his face was twisted in a permanent grimace of horror. But it wasn't just the body that froze me in place. It was the figure standing above it. The creature. It was taller than anything I had ever seen, its limbs long and thin, like twisted branches reaching out from a dark nightmare. Its fur was matted, clinging to its skin in patches, and its face. Its face was like nothing I had ever imagined. It was elongated, twisted, its jaw unhinged in a grotesque grin that sent chills down my spine. But the worst part, the part that froze my blood in my veins, was its eyes. They weren't eyes at all. They were pools of darkness, deep and empty, but they burned with an otherworldly light, like two stars in a pitch-black sky. They locked onto me with a hunger I could feel in my very soul. The creature turned its head slowly, almost lazily, and I could feel the weight of its gaze as it scanned me from head to toe. It didn't make a sound, no growl, no snarl, just that eerie, suffocating silence. But I could feel it, that presence pressing in on me, wrapping around my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I should have run. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like they were made of stone, frozen in place by the sheer terror of it all. The creature took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate, as if it were savoring the moment. With each step it took, the ground beneath its feet seemed to darken, as if the earth itself was being corrupted by its presence. The air grew colder, the fog thickening around us, wrapping itself around my ankles like cold, clammy hands. Then, without warning, it spoke, not in words, but in my mind. The voice was like a low hum, vibrating in my skull, sending waves of nausea through me. You cannot escape. I felt the words more than I heard them, like a pressure building in my mind, a suffocating weight that pushed me down into the dirt. The creature's grin widened, its sharp teeth gleaming in the pale light, and I knew, with a sickening certainty, that it was toying with me. It wasn't here to kill me, not yet. It was here to break me, to drag me into its world, where no one would hear me scream. I couldn't take it anymore. With every ounce of strength I had left, I turned and ran, pushing my way through the fog, through the trees, not daring to look back. The ground was uneven, and my legs gave out beneath me more than once, but I forced myself up again, kept moving, kept running. I could hear it behind me, getting closer, its feet pounding against the ground with an unnatural rhythm. The creature was playing with me, and I was its prey. Then, as if I had finally reached the end of the forest, I burst through a thicket and into another clearing only. This one was different. The trees were gone, and ahead of me, I could see the distant lights of the ranger station. I wasn't sure if it was real, if it was just my mind playing tricks, but I didn't care. I ran toward it, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stumbled into the clearing, the creature's growl echoed one last time through the trees, and then silence. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air, my chest heaving with the weight of the terror I had just experienced. My legs shook, and my body ached from the constant running, but all I could do was sit there in the clearing, staring at the lights of the ranger station in the distance. I wasn't sure if I was still hallucinating, or if the nightmare had somehow ended, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I had made it out. I had survived. The creature, that thing whatever it was, had stopped chasing me. I had felt it, heard it, seen it, but now, in the strange quiet of the night, it was gone. The silence felt deafening, and as I looked around, I realized something. The forest had changed. It wasn't just the creature that had haunted MIT, was the forest itself, as if the very land had been corrupted by its presence. The trees no longer stood as they once had. Their branches were twisted, warped, and the ground beneath my feet was slick with an oily residue, as if something had passed through and left behind a mark. The air was thick, heavy, as if the atmosphere itself had been tainted by the horrors I had just witnessed. I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get back to the ranger station, to safety. But as I stood up, a feeling of deep unease washed over me. The path ahead, the way back to civilization, seemed distant, unreachable, like it was always just out of my grasp. I turned and began to walk, slowly at first, then quicker, as the forest around me seemed to close in, the shadows stretching unnaturally long, the trees whispering their secrets in the darkness. I felt like I was being watched, not just by the creature, but by something else, something older, something that belonged to the forest itself. As I neared the ranger station, the lights flickered in the distance, their soft glow a welcome sight. I had made it. I was almost there. But then I stopped. I wasn't alone. I could feel it, that same presence, that same weight pressing on me. The air turned cold, and my breath came out in sharp, visible puffs. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I turned slowly, afraid of what I might see. There was nothing, at first. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught a movement. It was there, just beyond the trees, a shadow in the distance. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest, my hands shaking. It wasn't a person. It wasn't human. The shape that moved through the trees was wrong. Too tall, too thin, too impossible. Its limbs were twisted, like branches caught in a storm, stretching unnaturally in every direction. I stared at it, unable to move, as it slowly turned its head in my direction, and then it smiled. That same twisted grin, the one I had seen before, in the clearing, as the creature stalked its prey. The eyes, those dark, endless pits of light, locked onto mine. I could feel it again, the hunger, the malice. I didn't know how it had followed me. I didn't know how it had gotten here, but I knew it wasn't finished with me. The creature was still out there, still hunting me, still waiting for the moment when it would finally get me. I turned and ran, again. The world blurred around me as I sprinted toward the station. The sounds of the creature's movements behind me like a nightmare made flesh. But this time, I couldn't outrun it. The terror, the crushing weight of it, was too much. I stumbled over my own feet, crashing into the underbrush as I fought to keep moving. And then, with a sickening jolt, I felt it. A hand, cold, impossibly cold, wrapping around my ankle, pulling me down, dragging me backward into the waiting darkness. My scream was cut off as I slammed into the ground, my body smacking against the hard earth, my vision spinning. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the creature, towering over me, its face twisted into that same grin. It reached down, its long, gnarled fingers stretching out toward me, its eyes glowing brighter than ever. But then, nothing. I woke up with a start, my head spinning, my chest tight as if something heavy had settled on top of me. My eyes shot open, and the first thing I noticed was the unmistakable scent of pine. I was no longer in the forest. I wasn't in that clearing, or running for my life, or being dragged into the depths of the woods. I was at the ranger station, the familiar walls of the station, the worn desk where I'd spent countless hours filling out reports. The smell of coffee and the air, all felt like a strange dream, but I wasn't sure how I had gotten there. I couldn't remember how I had managed to make it back, or even how long I had been unconscious. The lights flickered above me, casting long, jagged shadows on the walls. My heart raced as I sat up, and then it hit me. What happened to the creature? The images, the sounds, the nightmare, all came rushing back in a flood. The growl, the twisted smile, the way the creature's eyes had burned through me with a cold, predatory hunger. I could still feel the chill of its fingers brushing against my skin, the way it had dragged me into the darkness. The fear was still fresh, gnawing at me from the inside out. I scanned the room frantically, expecting to see shadows moving, expecting the thing to be standing just outside the door, waiting for its moment. But there was nothing, just the sterile, empty space of the ranger station. I must have imagined it, I thought. It must have been some hallucination, a product of fear and exhaustion. But the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach refused to fade. I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong, that I hadn't truly escaped the forest. My body was here, in the station, but my mind was still trapped out there, somewhere in the woods, lost in that endless, inescapable darkness. I got up, my legs unsteady, and walked to the door. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I would find beyond. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, and when I opened it, I was met with the familiar view of the surrounding trees, bathed in the weak morning light. It should have been a relief. It should have been the sight of safety, of a return to normalcy. But it wasn't. The trees, those old, familiar pines, seemed different. They were too still, too silent. No birds flitted between the branches, no rustle of leaves in the wind. The air itself felt heavy, pressing in on me, as though the very forest was holding its breath. I stepped outside cautiously, my eyes scanning the woods, expecting no, hoping to see some sign of life, some indication that the nightmare had ended, but there was nothing. The forest was silent, unnervingly so. The path I had once known so well now felt like an alien world, a place where I no longer belonged, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the tree line. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, or perhaps some leftover remnants of the terror in my mind. But no, it was there, clear as day. The same twisted silhouette, the same lanky limbs and elongated form. The creature, it was standing just outside the station, watching me. Its eyes glowed faintly, those same unearthly orbs, as it tilted its head, studying me from the shadows. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. My heart pounded in my chest, my legs refusing to carry me as I stood there, staring at it. It didn't move, it didn't make a sound. It just stood there, watching, waiting, as if it had all the time in the world. I'm not crazy, I thought. This is real. It's still out there. The realization hit me like a wave, crashing over me with such force that I nearly fell to my knees. The creature hadn't disappeared. It had never left. It had followed me, watching me, waiting for the moment when I would step out of the safety of the station and into its reach. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I locked it. The sound of the creature's growl echoed faintly through the walls, and I could feel its presence pressing against me, as though it were inside the station with me, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I backed away from the door, my mind racing, I have to get out. I have to leave this place before it's too late. But I didn't know where to go. There was nowhere left to run. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it, the creature. Those glowing eyes, that twisted grin, and the oppressive weight of its presence. The image burned itself into my mind like a scar I couldn't erase. I could feel it, lurking just beyond the edge of my consciousness, waiting for the moment I would falter, waiting for me to believe that I had finally escaped. I spent the hours pacing the small confines of the ranger station, trying to make sense of it all. How had I ended up here? How had I made it back from the forest after everything that happened? The terror, the creature, the inexplicable silence, it all seemed like a nightmare, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no answers. Everything was distorted, like looking through a shattered mirror, pieces of the truth scattered and out of reach. I tried to reassure myself that I was safe. The station was sturdy, with thick walls and locked doors. The creature, if it was real, couldn't get in. I wasn't out there in the woods anymore. I was back in civilization, but the creeping doubt gnawed at me, clawing at the edges of my thoughts, telling me that it wasn't over, that the nightmare had only just begun. The radio, which had been silent for hours, crackled to life suddenly. I froze, my heart leaping in my chest, as the static gave way to a voice. Wade, do you copy? This is Ranger Station 432. Are you there? I let out a shaky breath and rushed to the radio. I didn't know if it was real or if it was part of the madness closing in around me, but I had to answer. I grabbed the receiver, my fingers trembling. This is Wade. I'm here, I said, my voice shaking. There was a brief silence, followed by a crackling noise. Where are you? What's going on out there? We've been trying to reach you for hours. Are you okay? The voice on the other end sounded concerned, but there was an underlying tone of confusion. I don't know, I stammered. I was out in the forest, and then there was something out there, something hunting me. I thought I saw it following me, but now, my words faltered. My mind was a whirlwind, each sentence crumbling under the weight of my fear. It's not over. I'm not safe. You need to send help. Help. Wait, calm down. You're at the station, right? The voice sounded more confused now, almost dismissive. Listen, we'll send someone out first thing in the morning, but you need to take a break. Relax. It's been a long day. You've been through a lot. But it wasn't just a long day. It wasn't just stress. The creature, whatever it was real. It was still out there. It had never left. The forest was alive, and I was its prey. No, I shouted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. You don't understand. It's here. It's inside my head, inside the station. I slammed my fist onto the radio, frustration and panic flooding through me. You don't get it. I'm being hunted. It's not over. The radio crackled again, and then the voice responded, more forceful now. Wade, I need you to calm down. There's nothing out there. Just wait for help. We'll be there soon. Just sit tight. I dropped the radio, feeling a wave of hopelessness wash over me. No one believed me. They couldn't. How could they? How could anyone understand what I had seen, what I had felt? It was too insane, too impossible. I was losing my mind. The walls of the station seemed to close in on me. The windows were shut tight, the doors locked, but the fear crept under the skin of the building. I could feel it was still out there. The air inside the station felt thick, suffocating, like something had entered with me, something that wasn't supposed to be here. It felt as though the station had become just another part of the forest, a place where reality bent and twisted. I started to pace again, my thoughts spiraling. The longer I stayed in one place, the more the walls seemed to close in, the more the fear grew. I couldn't stay still. My skin crawled with the sensation of being watched, though every time I looked, there was nothing, no movement in the trees outside, no sign of the creature. But the silence, it was too complete. The silence was wrong. I stepped to the window, my hands pressed against the cold glass, my breath fogging the surface. The forest beyond seemed to stretch on forever, but it wasn't just a forest. It was a place that had become something else. It had become a trap. Then I saw it. A shadow moved between the trees, faint, almost imperceptible, but there, a figure, tall and impossibly thin, standing just outside the reach of the station's light. It was watching me. I knew it was. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. The creature wasn't just hunting me, it was playing with me. It wasn't here to kill me. Not yet. It was here to torment me, to break me. I stumbled back from the window, my mind racing. How had it gotten so close? The station was supposed to be safe, but it wasn't safe. Nothing was safe. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching my head in my hands, the sound of my heartbeat drowning out everything else. I had no more answers, no more escape. The creature was real. The forest was alive, and there was nowhere I could run. The station felt like a tomb now. The air was stifling, suffocating, and no matter how many times I told myself I was safe, the panic never stopped. It gnawed at me from the inside, twisting my thoughts, reminding me that nothing was ever truly safe. The creature was out there, watching, waiting, and I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was still deep in that forest, running from something that would never let me go. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think straight. Every time I closed my eyes, the creature's face filled my vision, those glowing eyes, that twisted, inhuman grin. It was always with me, always in my mind. I pulled myself off the floor, my legs shaky beneath me, and stumbled over to the window. The forest outside was dark now, no longer a comforting patch of trees and earth. The shadows were thick and oppressive, and I could swear I saw movement beyond the tree line. A figure, maybe more than one, moving slowly, deliberately toward the station. I pressed my face against the glass, desperate to get a better look, but my breath fogged up the window, obscuring everything. I wiped at it frantically, my heart pounding in my chest as I strained to see anything beyond the blur of fogged-up glass. Nothing. The trees were empty, but I knew it was there. The creature. I could feel it, just beyond the reach of my vision, like a dark presence closing in. It was playing a game with me, dragging this out until I cracked, until I broke completely. I backed away from the window, feeling the walls of the station closing in around me, suffocating me. I was trapped. There was no way out. The radio crackled again. I flinched, the sound so loud in the oppressive silence of the station. It was the same voice from before. Wade, do you copy? Come in. Wait. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. How could they still be trying to reach me? Hadn't they heard what I said? Didn't they understand? There was nothing left. No one could help me now. The creature had already claimed me, and I was too far gone to be saved. But I grabbed the receiver anyway. Maybe it was some last bit of sanity, something to hold on to, a thread to cling to in the midst of the chaos. "This is Wade," I said, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper. "I need help. Please. It's here. It's outside. It's..." The static interrupted my words, sharp and jarring. And then the voice came through, clearer this time. "Wade, listen to me. You're not alone. There are others. We're coming for you. Just hold on. We can get you out of there. Just stay where you are. Stay calm." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Stay calm. How could I stay calm when I knew what was out there? When I knew what was watching me, waiting for me to slip up? "I'm not safe here," I said, my words desperate. "It's not over. It will never be over." I slammed the receiver down, my hands trembling. What did they know? How could they possibly understand? No one would make it in time. The creature wouldn't let them. It was always one step ahead. I backed away from the radio, my mind spiraling further. The walls of the station felt like they were closing in, the very foundation of the building groaning under the weight of something unseen, something malevolent. The silence outside had deepened, but it wasn't peaceful. It was a prelude, a waiting game, and I was the prey. I turned to face the door. The sense of inevitability hit me like a ton of bricks. It was coming. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't run. The creature, the thing from the forest, had already claimed me. And no matter how far I ran, no matter how many walls I put up, it would always find me. The lights flickered, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. My heartbeat thundered in my chest, and I could feel my hands shaking uncontrollably. Then I heard it, a low growl, not far off, like the sound of the forest itself taking a breath. A soft rustle outside, followed by the unmistakable sound of something moving in the darkness, just beyond the station's walls. It was here. I stumbled toward the door, my thoughts spinning out of control. Every rational part of me screamed that I had to get out. I had to run, but my legs refused to move. I was frozen, trapped in this small, suffocating space, my mind a mess of fear and confusion. I couldn't leave. I couldn't let it take me, but I couldn't stay either. The door rattled, a low, sharp, scraping sound against the wood. My breath hitched in my throat. I stumbled back, a wave of nausea threatening to overwhelm me, as I realized the creature was at the door. It wasn't just outside. It was right there, so close I could hear its breath, feel its presence like a heavy weight pressing against the walls. The growl came again, closer now, rising to a feral snarl. Then the stillness was worse than the growl. It pressed down on me, thick and suffocating, as if the forest itself had stopped breathing, waiting for the final moment. I turned to face the radio again, my only link to the outside world. It crackled again, but this time, there was no voice, no reassurance, only static. And then, in the distance, I heard it. A whisper, faint and cold. "You can't escape." I turned to face the door one last time, the silence consuming everything around me. The shadows outside seemed to stretch toward me like claws, and I knew I was never meant to leave. I was part of the forest now, a part of the thing that hunted me, and it had finally found me. The silence was deafening. I stood frozen, my body trembling, paralyzed by the crushing weight of the moment. The creature was outside. I could hear it, feel its presence in the air, like a pressure that squeezed the breath from my chest. But it wasn't just outside. It was in my mind, worming its way into my thoughts, twisting them into something dark and terrible. The whisper, the growl, the sensation of being watched, all of it was coming from within me now, like the very forest had seeped into my bones. "You are ours." The words echoed in my skull, louder now, as though the forest itself was speaking directly to me, flooding my mind with visions of dark trees, twisted roots, and the creature's eyes staring from the shadows. The voice wasn't just a whisper anymore. It was a command, a pull, an inexorable force drawing me toward something I could not escape. I felt a deep, gnawing hunger in my chest, a hunger that was not my own, a desire to be consumed, to give in, to let the forest swallow me whole. I stumbled back, my hands clutching at my head, as if I could hold on to my sanity, but it was already slipping away. The room around me distorted, the walls stretching and twisting, becoming part of the forest itself. The floor beneath me was no longer solid wood. It was soft earth, the ground that I had once known in the woods. The station was no longer a refuge. It was an extension of the nightmare that had claimed me. The air was thick, suffocating, and I could feel the weight of the forest pressing in on me from all sides. as if the very space I occupied was being swallowed by the abyss. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Was I still in the station, or had I crossed into another world, one where the forest and the creature controlled everything? There were no answers, only a deep, overwhelming sense of dread that hollowed me out from the inside. The growl came again, this time from within the walls themselves, a guttural primal sound that vibrated through my body. It was close. It was here. I could feel the creature's breath, like ice against my skin, as if it were pressing against the door, waiting for me to open it. I didn't dare. I backed away from the door, but it was useless. The walls were closing in. The air grew thicker, heavier, suffocating me with every breath. And then, I heard something that chilled me to my core. A voice. But it wasn't the radio. It wasn't the voice of the creature, or the one in my head. It was a whisper, soft and distant, but unmistakably human. Wait, my name? My own name, coming from the darkness beyond the door. I wasn't sure if I imagined it, or if it was real, but I felt an unexplainable pull toward it. A desire to open the door, to step into the unknown, to find out who or what was calling me. I stepped forward, my legs moving on their own, as if guided by an unseen force. My fingers wrapped around the door handle, and I hesitated for just a moment. My mind screamed at me to stop, to leave the door shut, to stay away from whatever was on the other side. But the whisper persisted. Wait, come, and I opened the door. The moment I did, the cold rushed in, a wave of frigid air that stung my skin. The creature was waiting for me. It was no longer just outside the station. It was within me, in my soul, in my very being. It was the forest. It was everything. I stepped into the night. The forest surrounded me, a sea of blackened trees stretching endlessly into the horizon. The moon above was hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds, casting everything in shadow. The path ahead was barely visible, obscured by the same fog that had once trapped me in the clearing. But now, it wasn't just fog. It was something more, a thick, pulsing veil that seemed to envelop everything, including my thoughts. It pressed in on me, filling me with the sense that I wasn't just in the forest, I was becoming it. I took one step forward, then another, and another. I could feel the weight of the forest's eyes on me, watching, waiting. It had claimed me. I knew it now. It had been watching me from the very beginning, from the moment I first set foot in these woods. The creature was only a manifestation of something far older, far darker, that had been waiting for me to come. I was its prey, and it had broken me. It had torn me apart, piece by piece, until I no longer recognized myself. The forest stretched on forever, endless, a maze with no exit. I walked deeper into the darkness, drawn forward by the pull of something I could not resist. The creature's growl rumbled in the distance, but it was no longer something to fear. It was part of me now, part of the forest's endless hunger. I didn't know how much time had passed when I finally came to a stop in the middle of the woods. There was no sound anymore, no creatures, no whispers, no growls, just the silence, the heavy, oppressive silence that felt like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. And then I understood. I wasn't just in the forest. I had become it. The creature had claimed me, not just as prey, but as its own. I was part of the forest now, and it would never let me go. The darkness of the forest enveloped me like a second skin, a suffocating, intimate shroud. My body no longer felt like my own. Every step I took seemed to sink deeper into the earth, as if the soil itself were pulling me in, absorbing me, until I became nothing but part of the unyielding, endless forest. The trees around me, tall, ancient, and twisted, whispered their secrets in a language I no longer understood. Their gnarled branches reaching out like hands to guide me deeper into their labyrinthine depths. I didn't know how long I had been walking. Time had lost its meaning, distorted by the endless, shifting shadows of the woods. It felt as though I had been here forever, or that I had just arrived. caught in a cycle that would never end. I was no longer sure of what I had been before, of who I had been. The man who had once been a ranger, who had walked the trails of this forest with purpose and clarity. He was gone, replaced by something else. Something older, something that belonged to this place. The whispers around me grew louder, rising in intensity, swirling in the air like a storm. They spoke of ancient things, of forgotten rituals, and rituals unspoken, of a hunger that had never been satiated. It was as though the forest itself had a consciousness, a mind that was aware of my presence, aware of my surrender. I reached out with my hands, touching the rough bark of a nearby tree. The surface was warm, pulsing beneath my fingers, as though it were alive in ways that defied understanding. I could feel the life within it, feel the ancient power that surged through the roots of the earth and into its branches. The forest was not just a place, it was a living entity, a being of immense power, and now I was part of it. But as I stood there, my fingers pressed against the tree, I felt something else, a pull, a tug, deep inside me, like a tether to something outside of this forest. It was faint at first, barely noticeable, but as the moments stretched on, it grew stronger, more insistent. It wants you back. I blinked, my thoughts clouded by the intensity of the pull. It felt like a memory, something buried deep in the corners of my mind, a place I had once known, a world beyond the trees. For a moment, I wondered if I could break free, if I could escape the forest's embrace. But the thought felt distant, like a forgotten dream. The forest had claimed me, body and soul, and there was no escaping it now. But you were not always ours. The voice came, not in words, but in an understanding that settled deep in my chest. I could feel the weight of it, the centuries of knowledge buried in the heart of the forest. It was as if the very earth knew me, knew my past, and it understood my hesitation. I stood motionless, waiting, feeling the pull tug harder now, more urgently. It was a call from a life that was slipping away, from a world I no longer belonged to. But as I listened, I realized something. The pull wasn't just a yearning for escape. It was a choice. You can leave, the forest seemed to say, but you will never be the same. The trees trembled, as if the forest itself was watching me, waiting for my decision. I felt the weight of it, all of the creature, of the shadows, of the hunger that had followed me. But it wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about escaping the darkness that had haunted me from the beginning. I was the darkness now. The pull, the longing for escape, it faded into the background, drowned out by the truth of my existence. I had become part of the forest, part of something far older and more powerful than anything I had ever known. The creature was no longer something to fear, it was part of me, as much as the trees and the soil, as much as the very air I breathed. I looked up at the sky, or what remained of it. There were no stars here, no moon, only an endless canopy of branches and shadows. The light from the station, the fleeting moments of safety, had long since been swallowed by the darkness. And then I understood. I had become an eternal watcher, a part of the forest's endless cycle. I was no longer a mere man, I was a creature of the trees, a guardian of the shadows. The forest had claimed me, and I had surrendered to it, becoming its eyes, its ears, its heart. There was no escape, no return to the life I had known. There was only the forest, and it was my purpose now to walk its endless paths, to witness the arrival of those who would be lost, just as I had been. I felt the creature, felt it moving alongside me, no longer a thing to fear, but a reflection of myself, a twisted version of what I had once been. We walked together, side by side, as the forest whispered its secrets to us. We were the hunters now, the ones who would guide the lost, who would pull them into the darkness and make them part of the forest. The forest never forgets. It never lets go, and I would never leave. I walked through the forest now, no longer as a man, but as something else, something twisted and ancient. The trees stretched endlessly before me, their shadows alive with the whispers of the past, of those who had walked here before me and been claimed by the forest. Each step felt like it reverberated through the very earth beneath me, each movement pulling me deeper into the heartbeat of this place, as if I had always belonged here, as if I had always been part of the forest's vast, unyielding will. The creature knew we were one now. It no longer lurked in the shadows, hunting, waiting to claim the lost. It was an extension of my own thoughts, my own desires. It moved with me, its presence always there, like the rustle of leaves or the shifting of the wind. We were intertwined, bound together by the same hunger, the same purpose. I could feel the pull of the forest in every root, in every branch. It was a part of me, and I was a part of it. The once terrifying growls of the creature were now merely a low hum in the back of my mind, a comforting reminder of what I had become. No longer a victim, no longer the hunted. I was now the hunter, the watcher, the eternal warden of the woods. The forest had changed me. It had taken everything I had been, my name, my purpose, my humanity, and transformed it into something that could not be undone. But as much as I felt the loss of the life I had once known, there was a strange peace that settled within me. The forest's hunger was my hunger now. Its desire to consume, to claim the lost, was a part of my very being. The darkness was no longer something to fear, it was something to nurture, to guide. I paused in the clearing, where the mist clung to the ground like a living thing, and I listened. The whispers had grown louder in the past weeks, a constant murmur beneath the surface of the world. The forest had sensed something that had wandered into its reach, something that had strayed too far. I could feel its presence lingering on the outskirts of my senses, like the faintest tremor in the air. A lost soul, a soul ripe for the taking. The trees shifted around me, their boughs swaying in a wind that had no source. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. It was close. The new prey had arrived. The forest had found its next offering. I turned and began to move through the trees, my feet no longer making a sound as I walked. The forest knew where to lead me, and I followed without question. It had become instinct, like breathing, like a deep, inherent pull that guided my every action. I didn't need to search for the lost anymore. The forest called them to me, summoned them from beyond the veil of the familiar world, and there it was. The flicker of light in the distance, the faint flash of a figure stumbling through the underbrush. It was a man, another wanderer, another fool who thought he could make it through the woods without understanding the cost of trespassing on the land where shadows reigned. I watched him for a while, hidden in the dark. The creature in my mind stirred. He was disoriented, his eyes wide with confusion as he tried to navigate the winding path ahead. I could feel his fear, taste the panic rising in his chest, and it thrilled me. The forest knew him, just as it had known me once. He was already marked, already claimed. I stepped into the clearing, the branches parting to reveal the figure. He froze when he saw me, his eyes wide with terror. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. He had no idea what awaited him here. He had no idea what I had become, what I had joined. He thought he was lost, but he was already part of the forest. He always had been. Who are you? His voice trembled, barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. There was no need. He could already feel the pull, the weight of the forest around him. The whispers had begun, curling through the air, sinking into his mind. The forest was speaking to him, beckoning him toward his inevitable end. I stepped closer, the air thickening with each movement, and the ground beneath him began to shift. The roots of the trees seemed to stretch forward, reaching for him, just as they had once reached for me. His eyes widened further, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he tried to back away, but his legs no longer obeyed. The roots twined around his ankles, pulling him down, his body jerking in an attempt to break free, but there was no escape. Please, he begged. his voice breaking. Please, I don't understand. The creature inside of me stirred, hungry, eager. It wanted him. It needed him. He is ours now. The words echoed in my mind, and as I watched him struggle, I knew the truth. The forest never lets go. It claims you, body and soul. Until you are no longer human, you become part of it, an eternal piece of the dark heart of the woods. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to tell him what was happening. The trees spoke for me now. The roots tightened, pulling him deeper into the earth. The shadows gathered around him, and the forest consumed him, just as it had consumed me. He was no longer a man. He was part of the forest, part of the endless cycle that would never end. As his final screams faded into the night, I turned and began to walk away. The forest was quiet again, save for the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind. The hunger was sated, for now, but the forest always hungers, and there would always be another. I had become something else, something new, something that would never leave. The forest's claim was eternal. The forest was endless, stretching out far beyond the horizon, and yet, it was the only thing that felt like home now. My senses were finely tuned to every shift in the air, every rustle of leaves, every movement in the underbrush. The trees whispered their secrets to me, and I listened, absorbing them with the same instinct that had become my new way of being. The forest knew me now, and I was part of its pulse, was my pulse, its hunger my hunger. I had wandered through the trees for what felt like days, though time had long ceased to matter. The night and day blurred into one endless twilight, where the shadows moved as they pleased, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and decay. There was no escape from it. There was no end to it. I had watched countless others fall victim to the forest, just as I had. The lost ones, the curious, the unwary. Each one had stumbled into the dark embrace of the trees, unaware of what awaited them. They were swallowed whole, their screams fading into the vastness of the woods, swallowed by the endless hunger of the land. And yet, with each new soul claimed, the forest's power seemed to grow, its influence expanding. The roots dug deeper into the earth, and the trees stretched higher, their limbs weaving together to form a thick canopy that shielded the darkness from the light. The forest was alive, and it had only one purpose: to consume, to claim, to grow. The whispers in the wind carried the voices of those who had fallen before me, and I could hear them now, speaking in tongues I barely understood. Their voices had become a part of the wind, part of the trees, part of the earth, and in that endless chorus, I heard the one truth that could never be denied. The forest never lets go. The hunger was always there, always lurking, waiting for the next lost soul to wander in, to become part of its endless cycle. The darkness called out, and it always found its mark. I had become a part of that cycle, but there was something else now, a new feeling, one that was foreign to me, one that twisted in the depths of my mind. I had always been part of the forest, yes, but now, as the whispers of the lost ones filled my thoughts, I began to wonder, could I ever leave? Could I, too, fall victim to the hunger of the forest, to the all-consuming pull that had once claimed me? I shook the thought away. There was no leaving. I had tried to escape once, and it had pulled me back. The forest didn't let go. It claimed you, and you were part of it, for eternity. There was no escape, only the eternal watch. And yet, the pull was still there. I felt the tug in my chest, a deep ache that pulled me away from the familiar woods I had come to know so well. Someone was out there, beyond the reach of the trees, beyond the veil of darkness. I could feel them, a presence unfamiliar, yet undeniable. Another lost one, another soul that the forest had found. It was a call, a beckoning from the world outside. I stood there for a long moment, my body caught between the two worlds, between the hunger of the forest and the distant pull of the life I had once known, the life I had lost. The trees whispered louder now, a warning, a reminder of what I had become, but I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't resist the pull of the lost soul. The forest had claimed me, yes, but in some twisted way, I could still feel the last vestiges of the man I had once been, still reaching for the chance to find meaning in this endless, consuming dark. I stepped forward, the roots of the trees pulling gently at my feet, urging me to stay. But the call was too strong now. I had to follow it. Through the dark, I moved. The forest seemed to part for me, the branches shifting, the ground beneath my feet smooth and unyielding, as though the trees themselves were guiding me toward this unknown presence. The closer I got, the more intense the feeling became. It was like a thread pulling at my very soul, leading me toward something beyond the trees. And then I saw it, a figure, a man, another wanderer, lost and disoriented, just as I had been when I first wandered into the forest. He stood at the edge of a clearing, his eyes wide with fear, his body trembling as he surveyed the darkened woods around him. He hadn't seen me yet, but I saw him clearly. He was mine now. I moved silently, my footsteps blending with the shadows. The man's fear was palpable, radiating from him in waves. The forest was already beginning to close in on him, the trees shifting and swaying as they reached toward him with long, gnarled branches. He was already part of the forest, even though he didn't know it yet. His panic only made the pull stronger, the desire to claim him more urgent. I could hear the creature stirring in the depths of my mind, its hunger matching my own, and I knew that this man, like all the others, would become part of the eternal cycle. He would be swallowed whole, consumed by the woods, his soul lost to the forest forever. I was the one who would guide him now, the one who would watch over him as he too became part of the trees, part of the endless, ravenous darkness. I stepped closer, my body moving without thought, my senses attuned to every shift in the wind, every movement in the shadows. And then, with one final, slow step, I reached out. The man turned to face me, his eyes filled with terror as he saw me for the first time. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. The forest had already begun to claim him. I felt the hunger surge, and I wrapped my hand around his arm, pulling him toward me. His body jerked with a desperate, futile attempt to break free, but it was too late. He had already crossed the threshold. He was already part of the forest. I smiled, my mouth stretching into a twisted grin. The forest had claimed him, and now I was its eternal watcher. Time in the forest no longer felt like something that could be measured. It was no longer marked by the rising of the sun or the shifting of the moon. The concept of time had become fluid, indistinct, like the fog that clung to the earth in the early hours of the morning. Everything had blurred together, the past, the present, the future, into one continuous, unbroken moment, a moment that stretched into infinity. I had witnessed countless souls arrive, lost and confused, just as I had been. The pattern was always the same. They wandered into the forest, their minds oblivious to the force that lurked within the trees. They became part of the endless hunger, their bodies and spirits consumed by the forest, swallowed by its gaping maw. Some of them screamed, some of them pleaded, but in the end, all of them were drawn into the ever-expanding darkness. I watched them, just as I had watched myself. They came, and they were lost, and they were claimed, but it was not just the living that wandered through the forest. The dead also came to the woods, those who had once been part of the world outside, whose time had passed, but whose spirits had not yet found rest. They, too, became part of the cycle. The whispers in the trees carried their voices, hollow echoes that drifted through the air like fragments of forgotten memories. I had become one of those voices, too, a whisper in the wind, an eternal watcher in the darkness. There was no escape. There was no end. I had tried to understand it once, tried to make sense of the unending void that stretched before me. But now, I understood. The forest was not just a place, it was a a realm unto itself, a timeless space where the laws of reality and existence no longer applied. The forest had no beginning. It had no end. It simply was. I had long lost track of how many years, centuries, or lifetimes had passed. The forest was ageless, eternal, and I, too, had become ageless, trapped in this cycle with no way to escape. I no longer remembered my own name or the world I had come from. All that remained were the trees, the creatures, and the souls that had passed through here before me. I had become a part of them, just as they had become a part of me. It didn't matter if I had been a ranger, if I had once tried to protect this land or study its mysteries. All of that had faded into nothingness, washed away by the endless, consuming darkness. I was a creature of the forest, now one of its many eyes, watching the endless parade of souls that wandered in, doomed to be claimed by its insatiable hunger. I had become one of the watchers, the keepers of the forest's secrets. We were the silent observers, the eternal guides, who led the lost ones deeper into the heart of the woods, guiding them toward their inevitable fate. I had no name, no past, no future. I simply was, existing within the endless cycle, trapped in a place where time had no meaning. But then, a thought flickered in the depths of my mind, a thought that had no place here, a thought that didn't belong to the forest. I could still remember the feeling of something outside, beyond the reach of the trees. The world I had once known, the world that had abandoned me. It was a distant memory, a fading image, but it still haunted me. I could still feel the pull, the longing, to break free from this endless cycle. Was it possible to leave? The thought was so absurd that I almost laughed. How could I leave? I was no longer part of the world I had come from. I had been consumed by the forest, bound to it in ways I couldn't comprehend. But the longing, the pull, towards something else, something outside, had never truly faded. It gnawed at me, a fragment of a life I no longer had access to. I wandered through the trees, the familiar dark paths winding around me, as though the forest itself knew what I was feeling. The ground beneath my feet was soft, familiar, but something felt different now. The forest's usual weight, its oppressive silence, seemed lighter somehow, as though it, too, was waiting for something. And then I saw it. A figure, stumbling through the trees, disoriented, lost. It was a man, just like all the others before him, but this one felt different. There was something about him that tugged at the remnants of the person I had once been. His fear, his confusion, it was familiar. He didn't belong here yet. Not yet. I stood in the shadows, watching him as he moved deeper into the forest. I could feel the hunger within me stirring. The creature that had become part of my soul, rising up with the familiar need to claim him, to guide him into the dark. But this time, there was something else, something I couldn't explain. The man's presence, his fear, seemed to trigger something inside me, a small, fading echo of the person I used to be. I couldn't just let him fall into the forest, like the others. I had to warn him. I had to. Before I could move, before I could make a decision, the forest's hunger overtook me. It was too strong, too consuming. The man, now only a few feet away from me, stumbled once more. The ground shifted beneath him, and roots shot up from the earth, wrapping around his legs, pulling him down. He screamed, but it was futile. The forest had already claimed him, and I felt nothing. No remorse, no longing. Just the cold, unfeeling presence of the woods, the endless hunger that I had become part of. He was swallowed up by the trees, just as I had been, just as every soul before him had been. The cycle continued. I had become the forest's eyes. I had become the forest's hunger. There was no escaping it. And, just as the forest had consumed me, it would consume every soul that wandered into its grasp, forever. The man was gone, just as I was, part of the endless, timeless void that would stretch on for eternity. The forest would always hunger, and I would always watch. The forest stretched on, an endless, labyrinthine expanse that I could no longer hope to navigate. Every step I took seemed to lead deeper into its grasp, yet no matter how far I went, it was always the same. The same towering trees, the same darkness, the same weight pressing against my chest. There were no paths here, just an infinite tangle of roots and branches, and the whispers that echoed in my mind like the last remnants of forgotten dreams. I had wandered for what felt like an eternity, but in this place, eternity was not a measure of time. It was a state of being. The past, the future, it was all the same now. There was only the now, a never-ending present that stretched on and on. A memory of something that was once real, but now, nothing. I was no longer the man I had been. The memories of the world outside of the people, of the life I had once known, had faded like smoke in the wind. I could still recall the faintest glimmer of a life I had left behind. A life that now felt distant and foreign, like the echo of a sound I could no longer hear. The face of the person I once was, the things I used to love, they were all slipping away. I had become the forest. I walked, not with purpose, but with instinct. The hunger within me guided me now, just as it had guided countless souls before me. The cycle was endless. I had watched others fall into the grasp of the trees, their screams fading into the night as they were consumed, swallowed by the darkness, becoming part of the eternal void. They were gone, but in a way, they were still here. Every soul that had ever been claimed by the forest, every soul that had fallen victim to its insatiable hunger, was now a part of the great, ever-expanding mass of shadows that ruled this place. There was no escaping it. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the bark of a tree, feeling its warmth, its pulse. The forest was alive, and I was part of it now. Its thoughts were my thoughts, its desires my desires. The hunger was a part of me, gnawing at the edges of my mind, urging me forward, to claim more, to feed the ever-growing darkness. But there was something else now, something that had begun to stir in the depths of my mind. A faint whisper, an urge that tugged at me in a way I hadn't felt in so long. It was different from the hunger, different from the forest's insatiable call. It was a feeling, a sense that something had changed, something had shifted. It was a voice that wasn't my own. It's not too late. You can still leave. I froze, my body trembling as the voice reverberated in my mind. It was faint, distant, but it was there. A call from the outside, from a world I no longer belonged to. You can still escape. The cycle can end. I stood there, my heart pounding, a strange, foreign sensation blossoming deep within my chest. The hunger, the endless pull of the forest, had always been my guide, my purpose. But now, this voice, this whisper was different. It spoke of escape, of freedom. It spoke of something beyond the forest, beyond the endless cycle of consumption and rebirth. It spoke of a way out. I shook my head, trying to dispel the thought. There was no escape. The forest had claimed me, just as it had claimed countless others. There was no way out, but the voice persisted, growing stronger, more insistent. You've been trapped for too long. The forest has lied to you. You are not part of it. You are more than just its hunger. You can break free. My chest tightened, the weight of the forest pressing down on me. It was too much. The hunger within me roared, louder now, angry at the thought of disobedience, of resistance. The trees seemed to shift, their branches creaking and groaning, as though they were aware of my defiance. But still, the voice called. It wasn't the voice of the forest. It wasn't the voice of the creature within me. It was something else, something familiar. I tried to ignore it. I tried to push it away, but it wouldn't leave. The more I listened, the more I realized this voice was a part of me. It was the last vestige of who I had been, the last whisper of my humanity. You can leave, the voice whispered again, but you have to make the choice. You must choose to resist. I stood there, torn between the two forces, the forest's hunger, its endless pull, and the faint, fragile voice that offered me the chance to break free. The hunger that had consumed me for so long suddenly felt hollow, empty, as though it was no longer enough. And yet, the idea of resisting it was terrifying, but I couldn't ignore it. The voice had become too strong, too persistent, too real. I could feel the weight of it, pressing down on me, urging me to make a choice that would change everything. I took a step back, my body shaking as I fought against the pull of the forest. The hunger still gnawed at me, but my voice, pushed me forward, away from the trees, away from the endless cycle. The darkness around me seemed to tremble, as if it knew that something was changing. The roots in the ground shifted, the trees groaned in protest, but I kept moving. The forest had always been the source of my power, my existence, but now it felt wrong. It felt like a cage, a prison I had willingly walked into. And now, for the first time, I understood that it was not my home. It was a place that had trapped me, a place that had consumed me and countless others. But I could break free. I could leave. And so, with every ounce of strength I had left, I turned my back on the forest. I began to walk away, each step harder than the last, each step pulling me further from the dark heart of the woods. The hunger within me screamed, a raw, primal cry of rage, but I ignored it. The voice in my mind, my voice urged me forward, away from the shadows, away from the endless cycle. I didn't know where I was going, or if I could truly leave. But for the first time in what felt like centuries, I felt the possibility of something beyond this place, something beyond the hunger, something beyond the forest, and I walked toward it. I moved through the darkness, step by hesitant step, as the forest loomed behind me. The earth beneath my feet was still soft, still alive with the whispers of roots that stretched deep into the heart of the woods. But now, it no longer felt like a call. It felt like a warning, a final plea for me to turn back. The hunger within me, the thing that had become my very nature, clawed at the edges of my consciousness, gnawing at me with an intensity that threatened to pull me back into the fold of the forest. But I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Each step I took away from the heart of the forest felt like a battle. The weight of the darkness behind me, the pull of the hunger, was suffocating. It was everything I had known for so long, everything I had been reduced to. The forest had claimed me, had shaped me into something unrecognizable. But that whispered the voice. My voice kept calling to me, urging me forward. You can leave. You are more than this. It wasn't a simple decision. The hunger, the creature within me, the forest itself, all of it, had been woven into my very essence. I had grown accustomed to the gnawing need, to the calls of the lost souls, to the eternal cycle of consumption and rebirth. The forest was everything, and yet, as I walked away, I could feel its hold slipping, slowly, painfully, like the tightening grip of a hand that no longer had the strength to hold on. The trees began to thin, the oppressive shadows receding. The air felt different now, lighter somehow, as though I were stepping out of a place that had become too small for me. I wasn't sure how long I had walked, or how far, but the sensation of movement felt freeing. The forest had no boundaries, no edges, but out here in the open, the world felt vast and empty. There were no trees, no roots pulling at my legs, no whispers in the wind. It was quiet, too quiet. I paused, glancing back over my shoulder, my breath catching in my chest. The dark silhouette of the forest stood far behind me now, its towering trees looming like silent sentinels. It was still there, waiting, but it seemed distant now, a place I had once belonged to, but no longer. The voice inside me urged me to keep moving, keep going. Don't stop now. You've made it this far. Don't let it pull you back. But I hesitated. The quiet had become deafening, and in the stillness, I could feel something else rising within me. A hollow, empty sensation that I hadn't felt in years. What was I without the forest? What was I without the hunger? What am I now? The question echoed in my mind, and for the first time since I had turned away from the trees, I felt a deep, aching emptiness. I had known the forest. I had been part of it. But now, I was something else. Something lost. Something adrift. The forest had been a cage, yes, but it had also been my identity, my purpose. Now, I was nothing. I'm nothing. The emptiness swallowed me whole. The hunger, which had once been so powerful, felt like a distant echo. The forest had shaped me, twisted me into something that belonged to it. But now, without it, there was no purpose, no drive, no reason to continue. Was this what it meant to be free? I wanted to scream, to let the raw, unfiltered emotion out, but the voice in my mind, that whisper that had led me away, pulled me in again. This is what you wanted. This is what freedom feels like. I wasn't sure if I was ready. I wasn't sure if I even could be ready. But with each passing second, the silence around me grew louder, more oppressive. The forest wasn't behind me anymore. It was inside me. It was a part of me, and there was no escaping that. The voice, the hunger, it was still there, wrapped around my soul, twisting, turning. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape myself. The stillness was too much. The emptiness, the cold, was unbearable. I could feel the hunger creeping back, a faint knowing feeling at the edges of my thoughts. I had stepped away from the forest, but I hadn't fully left. The darkness, the forest, it was never going to release me. I had become a part of it, and no matter how far I ran, it would always follow me. It was then that I realized the truth. I had never been free. I would never be free, and the forest would never let me go. The emptiness around me became too much to bear. I could feel the hunger rising again, not from the forest, but from within myself. I had thought I could walk away, that I could escape its grasp. But now I knew the truth. The forest had already consumed me. It had shaped me into something that couldn't exist without it. Something that was as much a part of the darkness as the trees themselves. I had left the forest, yes, but the forest had never truly left me. The air around me grew thick, suffocating, as if the weight of my realization was pressing down on me. Every breath I took felt heavier, the silence more oppressive. It was a cold, creeping sensation like being trapped in a cage of my own making. I had been free for only a moment, and in that moment, I had realized just how much I needed the darkness to define who I was. The hunger, the pull, the constant desire to claim the lost it was part of me, and I couldn't escape it. I couldn't outrun it. I turned back. The voice, the whisper, the dark presence inside MIT, all called me back to the forest. I could feel its pull growing stronger with every step I took, like a tether binding me to the heart of the woods. I had been walking away, but now I felt the certainty in my bones. The forest was where I belonged. It was where I had always belonged. I had never truly left. As I moved, the forest began to shift around me, the trees groaning and creaking in response. The roots, the branches, the shadows, they were all beckoning, as though the forest itself recognized my return. The familiar scent of pine, damp earth, and decaying leaves filled my senses, pulling me in, calling me back to the place that had shaped me into what I was. The forest was waiting for me, just as it had always been, just as it would always be. I stepped deeper into the woods, my feet sinking into the soft earth. The hunger was more than just a feeling. Now, it was a presence, a thing that had grown inside of me, consuming my thoughts, my identity. I was the forest, and the forest was me. And then, I saw them, the lost souls, the ones who had wandered into the woods, just as I had once. They were there, their faces twisted in fear, their bodies weak from the journey. They were the ones who had come after me, drawn by the same hunger that had once claimed me. They were mine now. The forest had given me a purpose. It had taken me in, reshaped me, and now it had given me power. I was no longer just a lost soul. I was the one who guided the lost, the one who led them to their end. The forest's hunger had become mine, and I could feel the satisfaction, the completion of the cycle as I watched the others succumb to it. I could feel them now, their fear, their desperation. The forest was alive with their cries, their panic, their acceptance of their fate. They had walked into the darkness, and now they would never leave. They would become part of the forest, just as I had. The trees began to close around them, their limbs stretching out like hands to pull them in. The roots reached up from the earth to bind them, to claim them. I watched as the darkness swallowed them whole, their struggles fading into the night. They were no longer individuals. They were part of the forest now, and I felt it. I felt the cycle complete. I felt the hunger of the forest, the ancient power that flowed through the trees, the earth, the shadows. It was mine now, and I was part of it. I had become the forest's eternal watcher. I was no longer the hunted, no longer the lost one. I was the one who led them to the darkness. I stood there, watching the last of the lost ones fade into the forest, and in that moment, I understood. There was no escaping the forest. The hunger was not just to force it, was a way of life. It was the only thing that had ever been real, the only thing that had ever made sense. The forest had claimed me, and I had claimed it. The cycle would continue, and I would watch. I would guide. I would lead the lost into the darkness, just as I had once been led, and I would never leave. I would never be free, for I was the forest, and the forest was me. I stood in the heart of the forest, surrounded by the eternal shadows that had become my world. The trees stretched endlessly in all directions, their twisted limbs reaching out like the fingers of an ancient, forgotten deity. The whispers that once filled me with dread had now become a part of me, as natural as my own heartbeat. The forest was alive, breathing with an ancient pulse, and I could feel it feel, the power flowing through every root, every branch, every leaf. But there was something else now, something that had begun to stir within me. A question. What does it mean to be the warden of the lost? For so long, I had embraced the role that the forest had given me. I had become the one who guided the souls into the darkness, the one who led them into the fold of the forest's hunger. I had become one with the cycle, a part of the eternal pull that consumed those who wandered too far into the woods. I was no longer a victim of the forest, no longer a wanderer lost in its depths. I was its keeper, its guide, its relentless warden. Yet, there was something different now. A quiet, reluctant realization was growing inside me, a seed that had taken root deep within my soul. The hunger, the desire to claim the lost, had become second nature to me. But was this truly what I wanted? Was this endless cycle of consumption the only purpose I could serve? I had seen countless souls, their fear palpable as they stumbled through the forest, unaware of their fate. They had been just like me, once lost, confused, helpless, and now they were swallowed up by the forest, their screams fading into the wind. But unlike them, I had made the choice to step into the forest. I had chosen to embrace the hunger, to surrender myself to it. I had accepted my role as the warden, but now, as I stood among the trees, I couldn't help but wonder if that was enough. I looked around at the dark expanse of the woods. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse with the life of the forest. It was familiar, comforting in a way, but the longer I stood there, the more it felt like a prison. The hunger that had once been a part of me now felt hollow, like an unquenchable thirst that could never be satisfied. What was I really? The question echoed in my mind, louder now, impossible to ignore. I was no longer a man, not truly. I had become the forest, part of its endless cycle, a creature of the shadows and the dark. I had helped countless others become part of the forest, guiding them to their inevitable end. But now, I was not sure what I had left. The whisper of the trees around me grew louder, but it wasn't the same now. The voices of the lost souls that had been consumed by the forest were no longer distant murmurs. They were closer, almost as if they were speaking directly to me. You are one of us now. You belong here. I shook my head, the words sinking deep into my chest. Was that true? Had I truly become part of the forest? Or had I just become another lost soul, bound forever to the darkness, a warden to keep the cycle going? I had tried to walk away, to leave this place behind, but the forest had always pulled me back. It had claimed me, shaped me, and now it seemed as if there was no escaping it. I had tried to deny the hunger, but it was a part of me now. I was the forest's servant, its eternal guide, and I could no longer remember a time when I wasn't. But in the depths of my mind, the question lingered. What if I could leave? What if the hunger could be silenced? What if the cycle could be broken? I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees seemed to part before me, the shadows shifting as if they were aware of my hesitation. The hunger still gnawed at me, but there was something else, something faint, a flicker of something beyond the endless cycle. The forest had always been my prison, but what if it didn't have to be? The wind shifted, the trees creaked and groaned in protest, but I didn't stop. I could feel the weight of the forest behind me, the eyes of the lost souls watching, waiting for me to turn back, to embrace my role as their keeper. But I couldn't. I couldn't be the warden anymore. The forest had consumed me, but I was still a part of something else. A flicker of who I had been, of what I had once been, was still alive within me. And though the forest's hunger called to me, though the shadows tried to pull me back into the fold, I could still choose. I could choose to leave. I walked away, my steps slow but sure. The forest was quiet now, but the silence was different. It was the kind of quiet that precedes a storm, the calm before the inevitable storm of the hunger. But I didn't care. I had chosen this path. And as I stepped into the fading light, I realized something. I was not just the forest's warden. I was something more. Something that had never truly belonged here. And for the first time, I felt the weight of my decisions settle on my shoulders. But it was a weight I could carry. I was no longer bound to the cycle. I was free. For now. I kept walking. The rhythm of my steps slow, but steady as the weight of the decision pressed harder with every step away from the forest. The hunger within me had not entirely receded. It still whispered in the corners of my mind, still pulled at my thoughts, urging me to return. But the longer I moved away from the trees, the quieter it became, like a distant echo fading into silence. The world beyond the forest was nothing like I remembered. The air felt foreign, untouched by the heavy, suffocating darkness of the woods. I could smell the sharp scent of the open world, the dry grass, the distant scent of water from a river somewhere, the crisp air of a place untouched by the forest's corruption. It was almost peaceful, almost, but there was something missing, a hollowness inside me that couldn't be ignored. I had chosen freedom, but at what cost? The trees were gone now, no longer looming over me, their twisted branches not blocking out the sun. I had walked far enough that they were now just a dark outline on the horizon. I had left it behind. But the absence of the forest, the absence of the endless whispers, the shifting shadows, the hunger that had become as much a part of me as my breath left me feeling unmoored. Was this freedom? Or was it just another form of isolation? I stopped for a moment, the silence now feeling like a weight, a void in the air that had never existed before. The hunger, once so familiar, was now a ghost, a phantom longing that twisted deep inside me. I had stepped away from the forest, but I hadn't stepped away from what it had made me. The hunger still lingered, still clawed at the edges of my mind. Was this what it meant to be free? I closed my eyes, feeling the breeze on my face, the light of the sun warmer now than I remembered. There was no escape from the hunger, no way to push it away entirely. I had tried, but it had been a part of me for so long. It had shaped who I was, shaped my every thought, my every action. Could I ever truly be free from it? I tried to think back to who I had been before all this, before the forest claimed me, before the darkness swallowed me whole. But the memories were fragmented now, like a broken mirror, pieces scattered, hazy, fading with every passing moment. Who was I without the forest? Was I still the same person? Or had the forest erased me entirely? I opened my eyes again, gazing out into the vast, open landscape before me. I had crossed the threshold. I had left the forest behind, but the forest had not left me. The echo of its hunger, the weight of its claim, hung over me, a constant presence that I could never fully escape. I walked on. The pull toward the forest grew stronger with every step. It wasn't physical. It wasn't a force I could touch, but I felt it inside me, tugging at my very soul. The forest still calls to you. I could hear the whispering now. Faint at first, but growing louder, more urgent. The trees were still there in the distance, their shadows stretching toward me like fingers reaching across the land. They were calling me back. The hunger, the pull, was never truly gone. It had always been a part of me, and it would always be a part of me. I turned. The horizon seemed endless, and the forest stood at the edge of it, like a vast ocean of shadows. It wasn't just the trees. It was everything. The whispers, the hunger, the pull that had been woven into the very fabric of my being. I took a step forward, then another. The choice had always been mine, and now, as I stood between the world I had left and the forest that would always call to me, I knew there was no easy answer. The forest would never release me, and I would never truly escape it, but I could choose how I would face it. I am the forest, and I always would be. With each step, the hunger surged again, but it was different now. It wasn't the same mindless craving I had once known. It was sharper, more aware, more a part of who I had become. It had shaped me, yes, but now I had a choice. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't escaping. I was walking back to it, to the darkness that had once consumed me, and I knew that it was still hungry. It would always be hungry, but so was I. And this time, I would walk into it not as the lost soul I had once been, but as something else. Something that had faced the darkness, seen it for what it was, and embraced it. Not as a victim, but as a part of the eternal cycle. I stepped back into the forest. The shadows closed in around me, but I no longer felt fear. I had left. I had returned. And now, I understood. The hunger, the pull, it was me, and I was the forest. The cycle would continue, but it would be different now. I had learned to face it, and I would be its warden forever.